Okay, everybody ready to go back on the record?
Thank you, Chairperson. We're still working on the January 12, 2016 transcript, and I'd like to look at page 141, please. All right, so looking at line 17, you stated in your presentation that the plan is to have a water supply from the Pasco Utility District, correct?
Yes.
And that plan has since gone by the wayside, correct?
That's correct.
And as I understand it, the Pasco Utility District backed out of the deal, is that correct?
They terminated the letter of intent that we had with them.
And the reason they were able to do that is because the letter of intent was non-binding.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, then going on line 20 through 22, you said your plan was to discharge wastewater to the Barberville Sewer District, and that was the original plan, correct?
That's correct.
And that's also gone by the wayside, correct?
That's correct.
Right. And why did that happen?
Well, when the town passed a resolution to oppose the project, we didn't really have any confidence that we would be able to, complete an agreement with the water. I think it's the Barberville Water District.
Sewer.
The sewer district. I'm sorry. Yeah. They had initially, given us a letter of support, but it just seemed that there was going to be no way that we'd be able to complete that agreement. So when we revised the water plan, the wastewater quantities dropped to such a point that it was easy to truck them.
The sewer district had given you a list of things that you needed to do in order to make using the Barberville Sewer District happen, though, correct?
Yes, they did.
Right. And you didn't go through that entire list because of the reasoning you just articulated?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, if we could look at page 153, simply to place in context the fact that we're switching to Ryan Hardy. Do you recall that Mr. Hardy also testified on that day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So could we look at page 170, please? And this is a... let's back up. I apologize. Let's back up to page 167. And that shows that Mr. Hardy appears to have finished for the moment, and you picked back up again on line 5, correct?
Yes.
All right. And so you continued with a pretty long answer, and I'd like to bring you all the way to page 170, line 8. Thank you. And so it says back in the day, this is you again, back in the days when you had vertically integrated utilities and need determinations were really made by public utility commissions, that has changed now, whereby the ISO is really responsible for selecting the new resources that are added to the system. And that's done by conducting the capacity auction that we talked about earlier. The ISO issues a number of reports where they talk about need and capacity requirements. And they published the regional system plan, RSP-15 they call it, on November 5th, which took a rather long-term forecast look for needs in New England from 2015 through 2024, correct?
Yes.
And ISO looks at this 10-year forecast traditionally, correct?
That's my understanding.
Yeah. Could we look at the very bottom of page 197, please? All right, so here, just for context, we're talking about emissions. And starting on line 22, you stated, so I could ask PA to speak to that, but the way the emissions reductions were determined was, going to the next page, using the Aurora model, and we ran it out to 2025. And it's kind of difficult to go out beyond that, because now what you find is you have to make rather significant assumptions about what assets are still going to be there and what's the world going to look like in 2025. So the exercise becomes kind of really a guess at that point, correct?
Yes.
All right, now I'd like to pull up, if we could, Mr. Niland's direct testimony in this docket, which I believe is in Energy 58A, subject to check. Thank you, and let's look at page 1 of the direct testimony. And I'm just going to walk through your direct, followed by your supplemental testimony for now. So it'll be a little bit more cohesive, I think. Page 1, line 3, you identify yourself as the Director of Business Development for Invenergy, correct?
Yes.
Is that still your title?
Yes.
Right. Now, are you a full-time salaried employee of Invenergy?
Yes.
You're not a consultant or an independent
No.
contractor? And does your compensation, do you get a bonus if this plant gets built?
No.
Okay. Let's look at page 4, please. And I'm going to be looking at lines of 13 through 20. And I really like this as a summary explanation of engineering for dummies on how this project works. So I'd like to just read it into the record and ask you 1 or 2 questions about it. So it says, please provide an overview of the project beginning on line 13. And your answer is, as explained in more detail in section 1 of the application as supplemented. The facility will be configured as a 2-unit, 1-on-1, parens 1-by-1, parens, combined cycle generation station. Each unit will consist of an advanced class combustion turbine operated in a combined cycle configuration with a heat recovery steam generator known as an HRSG, some people pronounce it HRSG, I guess, a generator and a steam turbine, and each unit or train will have its own air-cooled condenser, parens ACC. The combustion turbine, steam turbine, and generator of each unit will be connected via a common shaft, otherwise referred to as a single shaft machine. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
I'd like to kind of break this down for just a little bit. First, this follows up your earlier testimony where you said that each unit can be operated independently of the other, correct?
Yes.
All right. And I'd like to just kind of break it down a little bit. Each unit has a number of things. So on line 16, the first thing you mentioned is it has its own combustion turbine, correct?
Yes.
All right. And it has its own heat recovery steam generator, correct?
Yes.
And it has its own generator.
Yes.
It has its own steam turbine.
Yes.
And it has its own air-cooled condenser, correct?
Yes.
And they each have their own shaft.
They're all connected via a common shaft, yes.
Can we look at page 5, please? Beginning on line 14.
Just to be clear for the record and in my own head, you mean each turbine has, all those aspects of it have one shaft, but there'll be 2 shafts because there's 2 units?
Yeah, there's 2
Yeah.
units, 2 trains, as we like to call them.
Yeah, got it.
Each
Yeah.
train has got a gas turbine, a generator, a steam turbine,
And a shaft.
and a shaft, and then the gas turbine exhausts into an HRSG.
Right, yeah.
They each have their own HRSG.
They each have their own HRSG, and each HRSG provides steam to its associated steam turbine.
And you can run one of the units without ever turning the other one on, correct?
You can.
So looking at page 5, please. Beginning on line 14. All right, so it says the facility will be equipped with state-of-the-art air emissions control and sound abatement systems, and has been designed to minimize and avoid impacts to the environment to the greatest extent technologically and economically feasible. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And that is still the intent?
Yes.
Who is going to decide what is technologically and economically feasible?
We designed it so that it met the ordinances from the town, for the noise ordinance.
Well, here's my concern. I'll just lay it out for you and let you respond, okay? I'm concerned you have committed to meet the noise standard of 43 dBA, correct?
Yes.
No matter what it takes, correct?
Yes.
I'm concerned that at some point in time, if this plan is permitted, Invenergy may come to the town and may say, we've tried everything we can try in order to get the sound level down to 43 dBA, and it's just not economically feasible for us to get it down to that level. Is that something that we need to worry about?
No, I mean, we're committing to meeting that level prior to declaring the unit achieving commercial operations.
If the problem could not be corrected with your typical buffering measures, what would be the recourse, or what would you do?
Well, I think, first of all, based on both our expert and I think the town's expert, there's a number of things that you can do in order to correct it. Add additional lagging, there are additional steps that could be taken. So, that being said, right now our view is that we're going to be able to meet it. So.
I would have to go to my notes, and I know, but I think it might have been December, and it might have been hankered. But there was that testimony about certain GE units that were unusually noisy. Were you here for that?
I think it was Mr. Hessler was saying that he had a particular unit, I'm not sure where it was, that it had some sort of a pulsation or something like that. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you that Mr. Hessler also did the noise study on our Lackawanna project, and post on it. Oh, Hanker, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt, but I figured I should correct that.
Yeah, no, Mr. Hankard went back and confirmed that the operational noise that we get from Lackawanna, it met the plan, the study that was done for that project.
I just thought that testimony was concerning because sometimes things don't go the way people expect them to, and in that case it seemed like it was a mechanical or a problem that hadn't been foreseen that needed to be addressed.
Right, yeah.
I think I can probably say, Director Coit, and I've said it before, back when that testimony came in as the representative of Invenergy, this project will not go into commercial operation unless and until it meets 43 dBA, period. That's the condition, assuming you issue a license, that's the condition we expect to get and that we expect to comply with.
Thank you.
So I'm assuming then, based on the discussion we just had, that with regard to meeting the sound requirements, we don't have to worry about Invenergy coming back and saying, you know what, we've just realized it's not either technologically or economically feasible for us to do so. You'll do whatever it takes, correct?
Right, that's correct. You don't have to worry about that.
Can we look at page 8, please? Line 3. And here, I'm sorry, there we go. You are explaining here that you've contracted with Ben Water and Heavy Transport Company, a long-standing, that should say road, island company, has agreed to transport water to the facility, correct?
Yes.
Now, I assume that before you contracted with Ben Water, you have investigated them, correct?
Yes, we looked into their operating history.
Okay. And would you agree with me that they are, at least according to the Better Business Bureau, a company that has 6 employees?
I think the number of employees that they have may vary seasonably, but yeah, they had a number of employees.
And they are primarily a family-owned company that fills pools? That's their primary function right now?
They deliver water, using heavy transport, whether it's for filling pools or what have you.
As far as you know, have they ever been contracted before to supply water to a power plant?
Not to my knowledge.
Are you aware that they're not accredited by the Better Business Bureau?
I am not.
Do you think the town needs to have any concerns about the fact that the arrangement for the daily delivery of water to this plant is with a small company that has less than 10 employees, especially considering the fact that this is going to be required every day for the next 40 years or so?
I don't think there should be any concern. I mean, from my understanding, Ben Water's been in business for over 40 years, doing exactly the same thing, so.
Well, not exactly the same thing, is it?
Delivering water using heavy transport.
Okay. At one point in time, were you discussing the fact that the trucking would be done by Invenergy?
We thought about whether or not we would buy the trucks, own the trucks, allow Ben to operate the trucks, hire them as an operator.
Sure.
And it just, given their experience, and that, that's something that we don't normally do. I mean, we operate power plants. It just seemed like a better idea to hire somebody who's been doing it for a while.
Would you agree with me that it might make the town more comfortable if the trucking of the water was being done by a multi-billion-dollar corporation like Invenergy rather than a small company like Ben?
I'm wondering if Mr. McElroy is asking the witness to speculate about what might make the town more comfortable. I think we all know what probably would make the town more comfortable, but this is with respect to water.
I have to agree with that.
Okay. Do you think that there's any concern about, well, let me back up. Do you have a backup plan to Ben? What happens if Ben, for whatever reason, can no longer deliver the water on a daily basis, either because a key person at Ben passes away or is ill? What is your backup plan?
There were other trucking companies that we did have initial discussions with that, could easily fill that role.
Okay. But Invenergy is not willing to do that anymore?
I didn't say that. It just seemed to make more sense to hire somebody who does that for a living.
Okay.
And Mr. Niland, do I recall from the earlier testimony that, let me phrase it a different way, are you aware of any other power plant that trucks in water?
The Ocean State plant does it, periodically during the summer, I think, when...
I guess for their major regular cooling.
Not the, beyond the other plant that I think that Mr. Wheaton spoke to, that was about it.
Could we look at page 10, please? Now, beginning on line 4, it says for the FCA 9 SEMA-RI LSR analysis. Could you explain what is the LSR analysis?
It's the
Local source?
Yeah, local source requirement.
Right. So for the local source requirement analysis, an 800 megawatt proxy unit was needed to bring the zone and the system into compliance with system requirements, correct?
Yes.
And you used this as part of your analysis as to why you felt that ISO was saying that there was a need for another unit, correct?
Yes.
Now, would you agree with me that proxy units, since FCA 9, are no longer needed in the zone or no longer used in the calculation in the zone?
I think studies that were conducted after that point, they did not use proxy units, but we used it on the basis of determining the appropriate size for this project.
Okay. All right, let's look at page 11, please, at the top, beginning on line 1. And here we're talking again about your alternatives analysis, correct?
Yes.
All right, so you said it is important to note that the no-action alternative would mean that the existing, more inefficient oil and coal generation sources would need to be further relied upon, and they would not be displaced by a new, more efficient, more flexible project, such as CREC, and the environmental benefits associated with modernizing the generation infrastructure would not be realized, correct?
Yes.
Now, would you agree with me, though, that since FCA 9, there are a number of other new natural gas-fired units in our zone? In fact, throughout New England?
Well, in the zone, there were other new plants that were added, but they weren't combined cycle plants.
But they were gas.
Yes.
Right. And so, for example, let's look at the Bridgeport Harbor, for example, about 484 megawatts.
Yes, in the Connecticut zone.
Right. But in New England.
In New England.
Right. And it's highly efficient.
It's the same technology.
So it's highly
As
efficient.
Clipper. Yes.
All right. And fast ramp and fast start.
Yes.
What about Salem Harbor, 674 megawatts?
Yeah. Yes.
Same thing, highly efficient.
It is a little less efficient than Clear River, but still has those other attributes, fast start.
And fast ramp. And much more efficient than the rest of the New England average.
On average, yes.
Tuantic, 715 megawatts approximately.
Yes, in the Connecticut zone,
Highly efficient.
yes. Little less. It's a .01 as opposed to a .02.
Fast ramp and fast start.
Yes.
So these plants are all providing the benefits that you've outlined here, correct?
Yes.
And this goes along with the quote that you agreed with earlier when I said that ISO had stated in one of their reports that most of the major new resources attracted to the forward capacity market are natural gas-fired generators with the ability to start quickly. Correct. We talked about that when we first started.
Yes.
Could we go to page 12, please? Down at the bottom, line 22, we're talking about the air major source permit application addendum here. And go to line 25, and we're talking about the changes, and it says, the main changes to the application were to, going to the top of page 13, reflect the reduced use of oil from 30 days per combustion turbine to 15 days for each turbine. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, this question is more for point of clarification than anything else. Are you aware of the email exchange that's part of Invenergy Exhibit 217B between Mike Feinblatt and Ruth Gold on this?
Not off the top of my head.
Maybe we can bring it up. I believe it's page 2 of Invenergy 217B. It's an email from Mike Feinblatt to Ruth Gold. great. If you could blow up the paragraph numbered 1, please.
Yes.
And all I need is the first 3 lines. So again, this is primarily for clarification. We should jump up to the top. You were CC'd on this email, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you're familiar with this, correct?
Yes.
All right. So number 1, it says, in the September 15, 2016 major source permit application addendum, CREC proposed to limit total gas turbine ULSD usage, that's oil, correct,
Yes.
to the equivalent usage of 30 days per year at baseload. The statement was followed by a parenthetical, quote, parens, 15 days per turbine, parens, quote, which was not intended to propose a per turbine ULSD usage limit. When I read your testimony, and going back to page 13, line 1, it said, reduce use of oil from 30 days per combustion turbine to 15 days for each turbine. And then when I read this email, which is quoting from the major source permit addendum, it says, parens, 15 days per turbine. But then it says it was not intended to propose a per turbine limit. I don't understand that. What is your intent in this regard? It's important to the town to know how much it's going to run on oil.
Yeah, it's 30 days overall, and the intent is that, we didn't want to have it limited to, a particular turbine in case there was maybe an operational issue or something like that. So, so the overall annual limit was based on a 30-day operating period for one machine that could be applied, to each machines, but not to exceed the 30 in total. Does that?
I understand what you're saying. I'm just wondering why you were saying 15 days per turbine rather than just 30 days overall.
I think it was really just to simplify the explanation as to how it would perhaps apply to the turbines. But in the application, in the air permit application, we're being limited to the 30 days overall.
Right, so it's 30 days overall. This is what Invenergy is committing to.
Yeah, one turbine, 30 days overall, and that could be applied to either turbines, which on average could be 15 days per turbine.
I'm sorry, Council, but
I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you look farther down in that same paragraph, the sentence that starts therefore, you'll see.
Yeah, no, I've read it. I understand what's being proposed. I just want to make it absolutely clear that it's no more than 30 days, regardless of how much each one runs. The total can be no more than 30 days per year.
Correct.
Could we bring up Invenergy 217, and I believe it's on PDF page 88, or page, it's an email from Mike Feinblatt to Ron Gagnon, dated September 18, 2018, with a copy to Laurie Grandchamp and John Niland. It's definitely not 217B. My goodness.
congratulations.
Thank you. Good job. That's exactly the document. So, you've seen this. You were CC'd on this email, correct?
Yes.
And so, this is Mike Feinblatt. He's your air emissions expert, right?
Yes.
And he's writing to DEM about the status of the air permit.
Yes.
So, in the second paragraph, Mr. Feinblatt says, we were troubled to see the attached correspondence as an exhibit in the CREC EFSB docket between Ruth Gold and someone from the project's opposition on July 25, 2018, indicating that the draft air permit would not be issued for several months. First, it was troubling that the OAR, and you understand that's the Office of Air Resources, correct?
Yes.
Is so willing to provide status reports to the project's opposition. Then attached to that, could we bring up just for a moment, we're going to keep going back to this. We bring up that same exhibit on page 93. It's an email from Ruth Gold, dated July 25th, to Leah Donaldson of my office. Yes, thank you. Could we blow up the language at the top? So this is an email to my partner, Leah Donaldson, from Ruth Gold, which says, "Hi Leah, the draft permit has not been issued. At this time, I do not have a revised timeline, but as soon as I do, I will inform you. If a draft permit is to be issued, I don't expect it to be for several months." Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And you've seen this before, correct?
Yes, I think there were other emails part of it, but yes.
Sure. And this is the email going back, if you wouldn't mind, I'm sorry to make you go back and forth, going back to the previous email, 217, page 88, from Mike Feinblatt to Ron Gagnon. Yes. Which says, he was troubled to see the attached correspondence. This is the attached correspondence that he's referring to, correct?
Okay, yes.
Why was Invenergy troubled that this information was being provided to my partner by DEM?
We were troubled because we had made repeated requests to RIDEM to give us a status report, and we got no response whatsoever. And we needed a response because, as part of our responses to ISO New England on the forward capacity tracking system, we needed to have information from them, and we were getting no answer whatsoever. So this was Mr. Feinblatt's way of saying, "You're answering other people's questions, why won't you give us a response?"
Do you feel that the town was not entitled to get a response to their request?
No, I don't think that's what Mr. Feinblatt was saying at all. He was saying, you can answer other folks' questions, why can't you answer ours?
So you're not arguing in any way, or Mr. Feinblatt was not arguing to the best of your knowledge, that Invenergy wanted this process to somehow be secret in some way?
No, not at all.
Could we look at page 14, please? I'm on the, back on to his testimony. I apologize. I should have pointed that out. In Invenergy 58A, direct testimony, Mr. Niland, page 14. And looking at line 12. So here you're talking about, on line 12, the avenues for clearing a CSO delay of 1 year, and you lay out 6 different things that could occur, correct?
Yes.
All right, and so going over to the top of page 15, number 5, it says if the shortfall is not covered under one of the above mechanisms, then ISO-NE may terminate the CSO, revoke the rate lock, and could force CREC to forfeit its posted financial assurance. Do you see that?
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened, correct?
Well, not really. The ISO terminated the CSO on the basis of the project not being able to meet the schedule.
But they did all 3 of these things. They terminated the CSO, revoked the rate lock, and forced the forfeiture of the assurance.
Oh, yes.
Now could we look at page 18 down at the bottom? Starting on line 31, we're talking again about the noise. And your statement is that Invenergy is committed to meeting the 43 dBA limit during normal operations, startup, and shutdown, and is willing to include continuous noise monitoring on our site, correct?
Yes.
And you're still willing to do that?
Yes.
At Invenergy's expense to do the noise monitoring?
Yes.
Continuously, correct?
Yes.
It goes on to say, Invenergy does not believe, going to the top of page 19, that a performance bond or other financial assurance can be obtained to support this commitment, nor do we believe it is necessary. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Do you still feel that way?
Yes, I feel it's not necessary.
What about it that, let's break it down into 2 parts. The sentence says 2 things. Number 1, that you don't believe it can be obtained, and number two, you don't believe it's necessary. I'd like to focus on you don't believe it can be obtained. Have you looked into whether or not you can obtain it?
I think the question that
I'm sorry, Counsel, are you asking, has he looked into it personally or has Invenergy?
Well, let's start with him personally.
I had a discussion with the finance group in terms of having a performance bond, and the answer I got back is, what would be the basis of posting the bond, how would it be paid, and they had a series of questions that I did not have the answers to.
But did they at any time ever tell you it was impossible to get a performance bond?
They said you'd have to get the answers to those questions before they could even try to figure out if it were possible.
Did you try to find the answers to the questions and provide them to them?
I think on the basis that on the questions that they were asking me in terms of who would the bond be paid to or what entity, it just didn't seem to me to be possible.
So if this board were to impose as a condition of a license that they theoretically granted, a requirement that a performance bond had to be posted, are you saying that the project would not be built because of that?
I think we've already committed to not having the project declare commercial operation if it's not able to meet the noise. So in my mind, I think we're in essence posting a $1 billion performance bond. So it's hard to imagine what additional leverage any other financial instrument could provide on top of that.
I fully understand, Mr. Niland, that you don't think it's necessary. That's why I divided this questioning of this sentence up into two parts. So you've told me why you don't think it's necessary, which I appreciate, but I'd like to know why you think it can't be obtained. And if it can't be obtained, are you saying that that means that if this board imposes a financial bonding requirement like this, it would kill the project?
I don't think it would kill the project. I just have to see what it is that we'd be required to post. I'm just having a hard time imagining what that would look like.
But you haven't really looked into it past or have you looked into it past what you've just explained?
I mean, again, that's something that our financial group, would have more experience with. That's not something that's in my, daily routine.
Okay. And would you agree with me that, well, you've had a background in doing financial transactions for the power plants that you've built and other related transactions, correct?
Yeah, from a development standpoint, in terms of whatever development aspects had to be completed in order to assist the finance team that to get the financing.
Well, for example, with ISO, you're familiar with posting financial assurances with ISO, correct?
That's correct. I mean, they give you the copy of the letter of credit that you have to meet, and that goes to a bank.
So there are a number of different financial assurances that can be posted. You can have letters of credit, correct?
Yes, it's the conditions that go along with those. I mean,
Right.
that's said another way. I've been involved in situations where folks wanted a letter of credit posted for something that was unreasonable. And I'm not saying that this would be unreasonable, but people can ask for all kinds of things, and you take it to a bank and they say no. So that was sort of the questions I was getting back from finances to say, we need more definition here, or how are you going to do it, how would it be paid, and those are not answers that I had.
Did you ever go back to the town and say, well, the town's planning board is looking for this performance bond. Can you answer these questions so I can get back to my finance people and see whether or not we can obtain it?
I think the answer that we're giving you here is that committing to not operate the project, not to declare commercial operation if we don't meet the noise, is sufficient.
In your opinion, that's
Yes.
right. It's not the town's opinion, though, is it? You've seen the planning board advisory opinion, correct?
Yes.
They were very clear about this, weren't they?
Well, they were clear that they wanted something, but what that exactly was, I wasn't sure.
Well, it specifically said a performance bond, didn't it?
Payable to who?
I understand you could have
under
asked,
what conditions.
but you could have asked all those questions of the town so that you could get back to your finance people and determine what's available, correct?
Chairperson, I think we've gone as far as we can with this witness.
No, you know what? I'll withdraw the question.
Thank you.
I think we're good. Same page, moving on to the roads. Line 13. It says that Invenergy will monitor the condition of the roads and will commit to repairing any damage caused by the project's construction traffic. So what I'd like to ask you is a couple of things about that. Are you saying that you will not commit to repairing damage caused by traffic during operations?
I think the traffic that we have during operations, as Ms. Klebeck from McMahon testified, was within, the normal RIDOT rating, if you will, on the roads. I'm not the road expert, but, I think, said another way, I don't think we're expecting to create any damage to the roads during normal operations. And it was construction traffic that was a concern to the town.
Well, certainly construction traffic is a greater concern because of the increased number of trucks, but even during operations, you've got daily large water tanker trucks, you'll have fuel delivery trucks, you'll have hydrogen delivery trucks, you'll have ammonia delivery trucks, you'll have wastewater trucks going through, and there'll be a lot of heavy trucking going on these roads, correct?
Yeah, from my understanding as to, what McMahon had testified to, that increased traffic was well within the capability of the existing road.
So then Invenergy's position is it's not prepared to repair any damage caused by this daily trucking traffic, is that right?
That's correct.
Now, you go on to say that based on the review of the intersection of Church Street and High Street conducted by a traffic consultant, no redesign or reconstruction is required. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what McMahon Associates had testified to.
And you were here during all the testimony, as I recall, correct?
Yes.
And you've heard the concerns about this intersection and having to go in the other lane, correct?
Yes.
And I'm sure you heard the concerns about the trucks actually going up on the sidewalk in areas over there.
I heard they had to cross the line, is what I recall.
You don't recall the testimony about the trucks having to go up on the sidewalk and evidence that sidewalks were being broken as a result of that?
Yeah, I recall having to cross the line. Whether or not they had to go up on the sidewalk, I don't recall that.
Right. You would agree with me that it would certainly be safer if this intersection was redesigned so they did not have to cross the line, correct?
It would improve the current situation.
And is Invenergy willing to financially participate with a redesign and work with the town on that?
Well, my understanding is that the property that would have to be modified is private property.
Assume it could be obtained. Would Invenergy be willing to financially participate?
I think so.
Let's go to page 20, please.
Could I ask a question first before you go, based on the stuff you were covering before?
Yes, of course.
Going back to the section about monitoring the condition of the roads and committing to repair, was it Invenergy's intention to limit its commitment to repair to only damage caused by the project's construction traffic?
Well, yeah, right now that's what we have committed to, is to monitor the roads before the start of construction and during the course, and then once construction is done, is to assist in the repair of damage that may have occurred.
And what about damage that's caused by the trucking post-construction, just during operation, where it's less than the construction traffic, but still more truck traffic than that area currently sees.
Chairperson, if I may, 'cause I don't think he's authorized, but I am, and I believe I've discussed this with Mr. McElroy in the past. If there is a situation during operations where it is established that facility traffic has caused damage to a roadway, of course the facility will pay to repair it. But obviously we'd have to establish that, and I think that's the witness's concern because it will be part of the normal traffic. But subject to establishing proximate cause, yes, and we would accept that as a condition, that if we break it, we fix it, even during operations.
Unfortunately, Mr. Blazer, you're not under oath.
I'm aware of that.
Are you aware of the governor's tolls proposal, which is based on the fact that a lot of the deterioration in our roads is caused by heavy trucks?
I am not, but it sounds like it's very similar to Illinois. But with that said, my agreement with respect to a permit condition stands.
Should I continue? Thank you. Page 20, please. Lines 9 through 14. This is a requested requirement from the planning board again, and starting on line 10, it says require that ULSD only be used during maintenance testing or upon direction from ISO NE, and will not be used solely for economic reasons. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is Invenergy willing to commit that it will not be not use oil solely for economic reasons?
Yes.
And you know what I mean by economic reasons. In the event, we've got a 40-year outlook here, it could be that oil is less expensive than gas at some point in time. They'll commit they won't make that call.
Yes.
Right. You go to page 28, please. Line 15 through 17. So you're noting here that Invenergy consulted with the Narragansett Indian Tribe and the Blackstone Valley Heritage Corridor Commission, correct?
Yes.
Could you, did you have a meeting with the Blackstone Valley Heritage Corridor Commission?
Yes.
And when was that meeting?
I think shortly after they issued that letter that you introduced earlier. We saw that letter and we reached out to them and just sat with them and described the project.
Did you provide them with any supplemental information?
Nothing beyond what is available on our website. It was just a simple presentation. And then if they had any questions, tried to answer whatever questions that they had.
Were you asking them to withdraw the letter or change their opinion?
No.
Who was at the meeting?
I believe it was the woman who actually signed that letter.
Hold on. Megan Dupree?
I don't know. It could have been.
Okay.
I can see her face, I can't remember her name.
All right, that's fair. Who else was there?
I had Mr. Feinblatt, Craig Wood from ESS, I think we had Chris Donta and Jamie Duran from Power Engineers, involved with the transmission line. And there might have been a representative from National Grid.
And where was the meeting?
It was at the Blackstone Heritage building.
All right. And so you were hoping to satisfy their concerns?
Or at least address their concerns. It seemed to me that one of the concerns that they expressed in the letter is that they didn't have a lot of information, so that was the purpose of the meeting.
So after you met with them and you provided them the information that you had with the experts that you brought along with you, did they change or withdraw their letter in any way?
Not to my knowledge.
At the end of that letter, it states that significant additional information demonstrating the long-term integrity of the region is required. And did you ever follow up with them afterwards and say, do you need anything else from me?
Yeah, I'm just trying to recall, how we left it with them. I think I just told them that, if you have any additional questions, they have my contact information and they can reach out to me.
Why did you meet with them? What was the purpose of meeting with them?
I think, just as I said, they wrote a letter. It seemed to me that they were expressing a desire to get some more information, so we went and met with them and tried to provide whatever information they were looking for.
Were you hoping they would change their opinion?
I didn't really have a view one way or the other as to whether or not they would change their opinion. It was really, just to provide them with additional information.
You knew that they had expressed the opinion to this board that they were unable at this time to indicate that the project will not have significant adverse impacts upon the resources of the congressionally designated and nationally significant John H. Chafee Blackstone River Valley National Heritage Corridor, correct?
That's what the letter said, yes.
Could we look at your supplemental testimony, please? It's in Energy 58B, as in boy. And I'd like to start on page 2, please. Line 3. If you could, thank you. So the question is, does Unit 2's inability to participate in FCA 12 impact Unit 2's ability to participate in future auctions? The answer you gave is no. Unit 2 will be able to submit a new show of interest expressing Invenergy's desire to qualify it for FCA 13 in basically the same fashion it has done for the past 2 years. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And this show of interest is the same show of interest that you were talking about with the board earlier today with regard to FCA 14, correct?
Yes.
Right. And you did submit that show of interest, I assume, in FCA 13?
Yes.
But you were disqualified from FCA 13, so you did not get to participate, correct?
That's correct.
Could we look at page 5, please? Beginning on line 20, near the bottom of the page. So the question is, I'm sorry. Oh. Line 20, CLF's recent motion and reply to the EFSB states that, quote, it appears that section Roman 3.12.2.4 (S) allows the ISO&E to terminate Unit 1 CSO omissions if Unit 1 is forced to sell its CSO omissions, and this eventuality is a virtual certainty, end quote. Do you agree with this statement? And your answer is no. The quoted section is copied below, and as you can see, ISO has the right to terminate, but not the obligation to terminate, so it is not a, quote, virtual certainty, quote. Additionally, as long as Invenergy continues to make progress on the project, which ISO will monitor very closely, Invenergy anticipates that the Unit 1 CSO will remain with Invenergy. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And it turns out that your anticipation was wrong because they pulled the CSO, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm done with the testimony, and I'm going to start a little bit of jumping around, and we're actually getting close. So, I'd like to look at Invenergy 151. I believe this is the email from Kenneth Parkhill to, I'm sorry, it starts out with an email from Ryan Hardy to John Niland, but then the top of it has an email from Ken Parkhill to Ryan Hardy. We've talked about this in the past, and I want to, hopefully we'll be able to pull it up.
Part of 151.
part of this, 151.
What's the exhibit number again?
151, but 151 is a larger package. So this is just one page. Maybe a 5-minute break would be good while he locates that and we use the facilities. Says the old man sitting in front of you.
One next little breeze.
Okay, I'll take that.
Thank you.
5-minute break.